The Great Hall of the Conquered had never been so quiet. 12 species had built this place together over 10,000 years. They had created peace across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. They had ended wars, healed worlds, and brought light to the darkness between stars. Now they sat in silence, watching their civilization burn. Ambassador In of the stood before the assembly. Her body was made of living crystal that normally glowed with soft blue light. Today, that light flickered like a dying candle. She was exhausted. They all were. The holographic display behind her showed world after world falling to darkness. The swarm had emerged from the galactic core 6 months ago. No one knew where they came from. No one knew what they wanted. They only knew what the swarm did. It consumed everything in its path. There were nightmares given form. Part machine, part living creature, they moved in billions across the void. They ate worlds. They absorbed technology. Every weapon used against them was studied, understood, and overcome. Every fleet sent to stop them had been torn apart like paper in a storm. "We have lost the system," In said, her voice heavy with grief. 14 billion souls, gone in 3 days. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. They had been warriors once before they joined the Conquered's peace. Even they had fallen. High Arbiter rose from his seat. He was ancient beyond measure, his gray skin marked with the wrinkles of countless centuries. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had never seen anything like this. "How many ships remain in our combined fleet?" he asked. 42,000, In replied, down from 300,000 at the start of the conflict. "And the swarm's numbers?" "Unknown. Our estimates suggest billions, perhaps trillions. They breed faster than we can count them." Silence fell again. The mathematics were simple and terrible. They could not win this war. They could not even slow it down. A delegate from the collective spoke up. "What of new weapons, new strategies?" "We have tried everything," In said. "Energy weapons, kinetic bombardment, biological agents, nanomachine swarms. They adapt to all of them within hours. They learn from every attack. They become immune to everything we use." "Then we must negotiate," another delegate suggested. "Surely they can be reasoned with." "We have tried." In's light flickered with something like despair. "We sent 17 diplomatic vessels. None returned. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They only consume." Closed his eyes. He had hoped it would not come to this. He had prayed to gods he no longer believed in that there would be another way. But the universe did not care about prayers. "There is one species we have not asked for help," he said. The assembly went still. They knew what he meant. They did not want to acknowledge it. "The humans," continued. "They have ships, they have weapons. Perhaps they could." "No," In's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Absolutely not." "Ambassador." "You know what they are, Arbiter. You have seen the reports. You have studied their history." In's crystal form pulsed with agitation. "In the short time they have existed, they have committed more atrocities against their own kind than most species commit in 1,000,000 years. They wage war for territory, for resources, for ideology, for pleasure. They are barely civilized." "They are also still alive," replied calmly. "They have survived every challenge their world has thrown at them, every disaster, every war, every extinction event. Through violence, through brutality, through becoming worse than the things that threatened them." Nodded slowly. "Yes, exactly." The assembly fell silent again. They understood what he was suggesting. They hated it, but they understood. Humanity had been deliberately excluded from galactic affairs. When the Conquered first discovered Earth, they had watched with fascination that slowly turned to horror. Humans were intelligent, creative, adaptable, and utterly, incomprehensibly violent. They killed each other in numbers that reason. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire world, then pointed those weapons at each other. The Conquered had decided, unanimously, to quarantine the Sol system. Let the humans develop in isolation. Let them either destroy themselves or evolve past their violent nature. Either way, keep them away from peaceful civilizations. For 200 years, that policy had held. Now, with extinction breathing down their necks, was suggesting they abandon it. If we contact them, a delegate asked, what would we even ask for? They have no fleet capable of matching the swarm. Their technology is generations behind ours. We would ask for soldiers, said. Warriors, beings willing to fight and die against an enemy that cannot be reasoned with. Our soldiers fight and die every day. It changes nothing. Our soldiers are civilized. His voice was heavy. They fight with honor, they follow rules, they feel fear and doubt and mercy. Against these things are weaknesses. And stared at him. You want to unleash savages upon the galaxy to save it. I want us to survive at any cost. The vote took less than an hour. It was the closest vote in conquered history, but in the end, survival won over principle. The message would be sent. The transmission reached Earth's solar system within days. It explained the situation in simple terms. The galaxy faced extinction. The conquered needed warriors. Would humanity help? The response came faster than anyone expected. It did not come from Earth's governments or military commands. It came from a black site facility buried beneath the ice of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The message was short. It was not diplomatic. It was not reassuring. You want soldiers. We'll send you something better. We'll send you the ones we couldn't kill. High Arbiter read the message 3 times. He did not understand what it meant. He asked the Conquered's human studies experts to explain it. They could not. What does this mean? In demanded. The ones they couldn't kill, what kind of soldiers cannot be killed? No one had an answer. Deep beneath Europa's frozen surface, alarms began to sound. Lights that had been dark for 60 years flickered to life. Stasis pods that had been sealed since before the current generation was born began their awakening sequence. And in the darkness, things that had once been human started to open their eyes. The cosmos had requested troops. Humanity was about to send something far worse, something they had created in their darkest hours, something they had locked away because they were afraid of it, something that had been waiting patiently for a hunt worthy of its hunger. The Conquered wanted monsters to fight monsters. They had no idea what they were about to receive. Commander had not slept well in 15 years. Every night the same dreams came to her, cold corridors beneath the ice, screaming that echoed off frozen walls, eyes that watched her from the darkness, eyes that had forgotten how to be human. She was 53 years old, but she looked 70. Running Project Prometheus had aged her in ways that medicine could not fix. Some wounds went deeper than the body. Now she stood in the control room of Facility Omega, watching screens that had been dark for decades come alive with data, vital signs, brain activity, movement patterns. 47 stasis pods were cycling through their awakening sequences, and 47 nightmares were waking up. "Are you sure about this, Commander?" Captain Torres asked. He was young. He had read the files, but he had never seen a Prometheus subject in person. He did not understand what they were about to release. "No," replied. "I'm not sure at all, but the Conquered is dying, and these things are the only weapon we have that might make a difference." "Can they even be controlled?" Laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Controlled? No. Directed? Maybe. They're smart enough to understand orders. Whether they choose to follow them is another matter." The facility around them was a tomb. It had been built 60 years ago, when humanity was tearing itself apart in the last Great War. Governments had poured resources into creating the perfect soldier, something that could not be stopped, could not be frightened, could not be killed. They had succeeded beyond their worst nightmares. Project Prometheus had started with volunteers, soldiers who believed they were serving their country, scientists who believed they were pushing the boundaries of human potential. They had been wrong. The process involved genetic engineering, cybernetic enhancement, and something far darker, the complete restructuring of the human mind. Fear responses were surgically removed. Pain was rewired to register as pleasure. Conscience, empathy, and mercy were stripped away like dead skin. What remained was pure, distilled violence wrapped in flesh that refused to die. The subjects had not been heroes to begin with. The process worked best on those who were already broken, serial killers, war criminals, the genuinely evil. Take a monster, remove its limits, and you got something that made nightmares look tame. 17 termination attempts had proven that the subjects could not be destroyed. Bullets bounced off their modified skin. Poisons were metabolized before they could take effect. One subject had survived having its head separated from its body for 6 minutes before the nanomachines in its blood rebuilt the connection. So humanity had done the only thing it could. It locked them away, sealed them beneath the ice, kept them in dreamless sleep, and prayed they would never be needed. Now the prayers had been answered in the worst possible way. The first stasis pod hissed open. Cold mist rolled across the floor as the figure inside took its first breath in 6 decades. It was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, covered in scars and subdermal plating that made its skin look like armor. Its movements were slow at first, stiff from years of stillness. But within seconds it was standing, testing its limbs, cataloging the room with eyes that did not blink. Designation: Prometheus Unit 7. Former name: Cole. Before his conversion, he had killed 37 people across 3 continents. After his conversion, he had killed 6,000 enemy combatants in a single week. He was the most stable of the subjects, the most controllable, the one had chosen to speak with first. "Unit 7, she said through the intercom. "Can you hear me?" Cole turned toward the control room window. His eyes found her immediately. They were wrong, too still, too focused. Normal human eyes moved constantly, tracking small details. Cole's eyes locked onto targets and did not waver. "I hear you," he said. His voice was flat, mechanical. It held no emotion, no personality, just information transmitted through air. "You've been in stasis for 63 years. Do you remember who you are, what you are?" "I remember everything." He flexed his hands, watching the retractable claws slide out and back beneath his fingernails. "I am Prometheus Unit 7. I am a weapon. I was created to kill, and I was locked away because I could not be stopped." "That's correct. Why am I awake?" Hesitated. Even after all these years, looking into those eyes made her skin crawl. There was nothing human left in there. Nothing that understood mercy or kindness or love. Just hunger wrapped in intelligence. "There's a war," she said. "Not on Earth, in the galaxy. Aliens have requested our help." Cole processed this. His expression did not change, but something shifted in his posture. Interest, maybe, or something darker. "Aliens," he repeated. "Tell me about the enemy." Activated the holographic display. Images of filled the room, endless swarms of biomechanical horrors, mandibles dripping with acidic fluids, bodies that seemed to be half machine and half nightmare. Battle footage showed them tearing through armored soldiers like paper, adapting to weapons in real time, consuming worlds. "They're called the Swarm, billions of them, maybe trillions. They adapt to every weapon used against them. They feel no fear. They cannot be reasoned with. They have destroyed a dozen civilizations in 6 months." Cole watched the footage in silence. When it ended, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 63 years, he smiled. It was the most terrifying thing had ever seen. Finally, Cole said, "Something interesting." Behind him, more stasis pods were opening. 46 other figures were emerging from their frozen sleep, stretching limbs that had not moved in decades, testing bodies that had been rebuilt into weapons. They did not speak to each other. They did not need to. They shared something deeper than words, a purpose written into their modified neural architecture. They were hunters. They had been created for war, and they had been waiting a very, very long time for prey worthy of their hunger. Gave them 4 hours to recover from stasis. Then she began the mission briefing. The subjects sat in perfect silence, absorbing every detail: enemy numbers, tactics, weaknesses, strengths. They asked no questions about strategy or objectives. They asked only one thing. "When do we leave?" Cole asked. 12 hours. Too long. Stared at him. "You've been asleep for 60 years. You need time to." "We need nothing." Cole stood and, despite herself, took a step back. "We have been waiting in the darkness, dreaming of hunts we could not have. Now you offer us prey beyond imagination, billions of targets, enemies that adapt and evolve, a challenge worthy of what we are." He moved toward the door, and the other subjects rose to follow him. They moved as one, without communication, like fingers on the same hand. "Do not make us wait, Commander," Cole said without turning. "We have been patient for 60 years. Our patience is running out." The door closed behind them. Let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Captain Torres was pale beside her. "Commander," he whispered, "what have we agreed to send out there?" Watched the subjects' tracking signals move through the facility toward the armory. They would select weapons. They would prepare. And in 12 hours, they would board a ship and travel across the stars to wage war on an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. She should have felt hope. Instead, she felt only dread. "Monsters," she said quietly. "We're sending monsters." "But they're on our side, right?" Did not answer. She was not sure the question even made sense when it came to Prometheus. They were not on anyone's side. They were a force of nature, violence distilled into human form. They would fight because they were prey, nothing more. And when the prey was gone, they would start looking for more. The human transport ship was small and ugly. It had no elegant curves like conquered vessels, no shimmering shields or graceful wings. It was a box of metal and fire that crossed the stars through brute force rather than engineering beauty. Ambassador watched it descend through the atmosphere of conquered Station Prime. Around her stood delegates from all 12 species, warriors, diplomats, scientists. They had prepared for this moment carefully. Translation matrices were ready. Cultural exchange protocols had been drafted. Welcoming ceremonies had been arranged. They expected soldiers, professional warriors who would integrate with conquered forces and follow conquered command. They were wrong. The ship's ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the figures began to emerge. 47 of them walked down the ramp in perfect synchronization. Their feet hit the ground at exactly the same instant. Their arms swung at exactly the same angle. They moved like one organism wearing 47 bodies. In's crystal form flickered with unease. Something was wrong. These beings looked human: 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal posture, but they did not move like any creature she had ever seen. Too smooth, too precise, every motion calculated for maximum efficiency. And their eyes were the worst part. They swept across the assembled aliens without curiosity, without greeting, without any emotion at all. They were cataloging, assessing, measuring. In had seen predators before. She had studied the hunting beasts of 100 worlds. These beings looked at her the same way those beasts looked at meat. High Arbiter stepped forward, his ancient voice carrying across the landing platform. "Welcome to conquered Station Prime. We are grateful for humanity's assistance in this dark hour." The beings did not respond. They continued their silent assessment. A single baseline human emerged from behind them, a woman in a gray military uniform. She looked tired. She looked old. She looked afraid of the things standing before her. "I am Commander," she said, "representative of Earth's combined military command. These are the soldiers we have sent to fight your war." "We welcome them," said, though his voice wavered slightly. We have prepared quarters, briefing materials, integration protocols. They won't need quarters, interrupted. They don't sleep. Not really. Brief them on the enemy, point them at the fight, and get out of their way. In moved forward, her crystalline form pulsing with authority. Commander, we must insist on proper coordination. These soldiers must work within conquered command structures. They must follow our rules of engagement. One of the beings, the largest one, covered in scars and subdermal plating, turned its attention to her, and felt her light dim involuntarily. Rules, the being said. Its voice was flat, empty of anything resembling warmth. You want rules? Of course, we are civilized beings. We do not wage war like barbarians. The being tilted its head. The movement was wrong, too quick, too precise, like a machine testing its range of motion. You are losing, it said. 12 civilizations have fallen, your fleets are broken, your worlds are burning, and you want to give us rules. Show us the enemy. The demand was not a request. It was not a suggestion. It was a command from something that expected to be obeyed. In wanted to argue. She wanted to assert her authority as a conquered ambassador. But when she looked into those empty eyes, her words died in her throat. The briefing took place in the station's war room. Holographic displays showed the current state of the conflict, swarm movements, fallen worlds, refugee routes, fleet positions. It was a map of slow-motion extinction. The Prometheus subjects watched without expression. They absorbed data, enemy numbers, behavior patterns, adaptation rates, attack vectors, with perfect attention. They asked no questions about strategy or politics or objectives. They asked only about the prey. They adapt to weapons within hours, a conquered general explained. Energy weapons were effective for 3 days. Then they developed reflective carapaces. Kinetic weapons worked for a week. Then they grew impact-absorbing tissue. We have run out of ideas. The lead subject had called it Unit 7 spoke. You use the same weapons across all engagements. Yes, standard conquered military doctrine. It allows for coordinated tactics and supply line efficiency. It also lets them study your weapons and develop countermeasures. Unit 7's voice held something that might have been contempt. You fight like a machine, the same patterns, the same responses, the learn machines easily. Then how would you fight them? Unit 7 looked at its fellow subjects. Something passed between them, communication without words, understanding without gesture. When it turned back, its expression had not changed, but something in its posture had shifted. You fight machines with chaos, it said. You fight adaptation with constant change. You fight swarms with things that move faster, think faster, and kill faster than the swarm can learn. And you can do this. We were built for this. We are chaos in human form. We do not repeat patterns. We do not hesitate. We do not stop. It paused. We do not die. The general looked too for confirmation. She nodded slowly. They can't be killed, she said quietly. We tried. Many times. They regenerate from wounds that would destroy any normal organism. Their bodies reject toxins, repair damage, rebuild destroyed tissue. They feel no pain, or rather, they feel it differently, as pleasure rather than suffering. The room went silent. The alien delegates looked at the Prometheus subjects with new eyes, not soldiers, not warriors. Monsters. On Earth, continued, they were created during our last great war. The process that made them requires certain types of individuals, those who are already broken, already violent. We took our worst, killers, criminals, war makers, and we rebuilt them into living weapons. You weaponized evil, In said, her voice barely above a whisper. We weaponized survival. When you face extinction, you use what you have. Unit 7 stepped forward. The alien delegates stepped back. You asked for soldiers, it said. You got us. We are not soldiers. Soldiers fight for causes, for honor, for love of home. We fight because we were made to fight, because violence is the only language we understand, because the alternative is the emptiness that exists where our souls used to be. It looked at the holographic map, at the swarm moving across the galaxy like a tide of death. They consume worlds, they number in billions, they adapt and evolve and destroy. For the first time, something flickered in those dead eyes, something hungry. They are the greatest prey any of us has ever seen. Prey asked. Prey targets, victims. Unit 7 turned to face him directly. You see them as enemies to be defeated. We see them as meat to be harvested. There is a difference. What difference? Soldiers want wars to end. Hunters want prey to be plentiful. A pause. We will fight your war, we will destroy your enemy. But understand, we are not doing this for you. We are not doing this for the galaxy. We are doing this because they are worthy prey and we have been starving for 60 years. It turned away, the other subjects falling into formation behind it. Deploy us to Prime, it said. The swarm masses there, we will begin the hunt. The delegates watched them go in stunned silence, in move to side. What have we done? She asked. Shook his head slowly. We have released something worse than the swarm into the galaxy, something our civilizations deliberately avoided creating. Can they truly defeat the? Perhaps, but I find myself wondering, when they are gone, what will these creatures hunt next? He had no answer, neither did anyone else. Commander stood alone at the back of the room, watching her monsters disappear into the station's corridors. She had spent 15 years trying to keep them contained. Now she had set them free. The universe was about to learn what humanity truly was. Not a peaceful species pretending to be dangerous. A dangerous species pretending to be peaceful. Prime had been a beautiful world once, green forests, blue oceans, cities that touched the clouds. 14 billion beings had called it home. Now it was a battlefield. The swarm covered the planet like a living carpet. Billions of biomechanical horrors crawled across the surface, consuming everything in their path. Cities had become nests. Forests had become breeding grounds. The oceans boiled with larvae that would grow into new swarm units within days. The conquered had written off Prime. There was nothing to save. The only question was how long the swarm would feed before moving to its next target. Then the human ship arrived. It was small, barely larger than a shuttle. It carried no fleet, no army, just 47 figures in drop pods. The pods screamed through the atmosphere, trailing fire and smoke. They scattered across the continent, each landing in a different zone of swarm concentration, each carrying a single Prometheus subject and whatever weapons it had chosen for the hunt. Unit 7, the thing that had once been coal, hit the ground in the center of a breeding pit. The impact crater smoldered around him as he rose, shaking off dirt and debris. His weapons were simple, a crystalline blade that never needed sharpening, a belt of explosive compounds, and his own body. The swarm noticed him immediately. They always noticed movement. Thousands of turned toward the crater, mandibles clicking, biosensors tracking. He was a single target in a sea of death. He smiled. The first wave hit him 30 seconds later. 300 attacked at once, a standard swarm tactic that had overwhelmed conquered battle lines countless times. They came from every direction, mandibles designed to pierce starship armor closing on his flesh. Cole moved. To watching observers, conquered drones that transmitted footage back to the fleet, it did not look like movement. It looked like reality glitching. One moment Cole was standing still. The next, 6 were falling in pieces, their processing cores carved out with surgical precision. He did not fight like a soldier. Soldiers stood their ground, followed formations, covered their allies. Cole flowed through the swarm like water through cracks. Every motion served multiple purposes. A dodge became an attack, a block became a killing stroke, a step became a launch point for another assault. They tried to adapt. They always adapted. They adjusted their attack patterns, targeted his sensory organs, coordinated their movements to overwhelm him from all sides. It did not matter. Cole had no patterns to predict. His fighting style changed with every second. Sometimes he was a whirlwind of blades. Sometimes he was perfectly still, letting enemies impale themselves on his weapons. Sometimes he simply walked forward, ignoring wounds that would kill any normal being, his hands tearing through chitin and circuitry with raw strength. He felt every wound, every bite, every slash. The pain was exquisite. His rewired nervous system translated agony into pleasure, turning every injury into a reward. The deeper they cut, the better he felt. The more he enjoyed himself. 3,000 in this zone, he said through the tactical link. His voice was calm, almost bored. I'll be done in 8 hours. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Each Prometheus subject had found their own swarm concentration. Each was conducting their own hunt. Unit 12 was in the ruins of a city. Before its conversion, it had been a serial killer who targeted children. Now it moved through the rubble, laughing in frequencies that they could hear, frequencies that triggered fear responses in their biomechanical brains. For the first time in their evolution, swarm units were running away from prey. Unit 12 followed. It always followed. Unit 31 had found the main breeding grounds. Before its conversion, it had been a war criminal responsible for 3 genocides. It had developed a talent for mass death that translated perfectly to alien targets. It had brought incendiary weapons, compounds that they had never encountered, that their adaptive biology could not process quickly enough. The breeding grounds burned, and 31 walked through the flames without slowing. Unit 23 had infiltrated a swarm command node. Before its conversion, it had been an assassin with 400 confirmed kills. Now it moved through like a ghost, killing the coordinator organisms that gave the swarm its intelligence. Without coordination, the local swarm fell into chaos. 23 did not stop. It moved to the next node, and the next, and the next. The battle lasted 17 hours. The conquered observers watched in growing horror. "They're not fighting," In whispered. She was aboard the observation ship watching feeds from across the planet. "They're feeding." It was the only word that fit. The Prometheus subjects did not fight to win. They did not fight to survive. They fought to consume, not flesh, but violence itself. They drank in destruction like water in a desert. And they could not stop them. The swarm tried everything. It adapted its armor. The subjects switched to weapons that ignored armor. It adapted its tactics. The subjects had no tactics to predict. It tried overwhelming numbers. The subjects could not be overwhelmed because they could not be killed. Every wound healed. Every injury regenerated. One subject lost an arm and continued fighting for 3 hours before the limb grew back. By hour 12, something unprecedented happened. Swarm units began retreating. They had never retreated. In 10,000 years of conquest, they had never pulled back from a fight. They consumed or they died. There was no middle ground. But these were not normal enemies. These were predators that could not be stopped, could not be predicted, could not be killed. The swarm's survival instincts, ancient algorithms buried deep in their collective consciousness, identified a threat that could not be overcome. For the first time in their evolution, they felt fear. Cole stood among mountains of biomechanical corpses. He was covered in fluids that were not blood, wounds that were already closing. Around him, the swarm was fleeing, billions of units streaming toward there, abandoning Prime in waves. He looked up at the sky, watching the swarm ships lift off. "They're learning," he said through the tactical link. "They understand what we are now." His voice came through the channel. She was aboard the observation ship, watching from orbit. "Is that good or bad?" "Good for the war, bad for our entertainment." Cole's voice held something that might have been disappointment. Prey that runs is less satisfying than prey that fights. They're leaving the planet. Yes, but they'll be back, or they'll go somewhere else, it doesn't matter. He began walking toward the nearest swarm ship, one that hadn't managed to launch yet, its engines damaged in the chaos. We'll follow, we'll find them, we'll hunt them until there are none left. And then, Cole did not answer immediately. He reached the grounded swarm ship and began climbing its hull, his claws digging into the biomechanical surface like a spider scaling a wall. Then we'll be very hungry again, he finally said, and you'll have to find us new prey. The tactical link went silent. Cole disappeared into the swarm ship, and sounds of violence echoed across the channel. Aboard the observation vessel, turned to in. We have made a terrible mistake, he said quietly. We're winning. Yes, but at what cost? The old arbiter looked at the feeds, the Prometheus subjects moving through swarm formations like wolves through sheep. We asked humans for monsters. They gave us exactly what we asked for. I fear we will never be able to put them back. In watched Unit 7 tear through the interior of a swarm ship, leaving destruction in its wake. The swarm was retreating across the entire planet now, across the entire system. They had found something worse than themselves. And somewhere in the vast collective consciousness of a new understanding was forming, a new fear, a new memory that would echo through their evolution forever. There were predators in the galaxy that could not be stopped. And they were coming. The war ended in 7 months. 7 months. The conquered had prepared for decades of conflict. They had calculated extinction timelines. They had planned refugee routes and last-stand defenses. They had made peace with the end of their civilizations. And then 47 monsters had hunted to the edge of the galaxy. The swarm had tried everything. They had adapted their biology. They had changed their tactics. They had fled to the darkest corners of space. It did not matter. The Prometheus subjects followed, they tracked, they hunted, they killed. It was not war, it was extermination. In the final weeks, they did something they had never done in 10,000 years of conquest. They sent a message, not an attack, not a demand, a plea. We will leave, we will never return, please stop the hunters. The conquered debated the response for 3 days. In the end, they agreed to the terms. They retreated beyond the galactic rim, disappearing into the void between galaxies. Whether they would return someday, no one knew. But they remembered the monsters now. They would remember forever. The victory celebration was quiet. There were no parades, no speeches, no monuments. How do you celebrate being saved by something you cannot control, something you fear almost as much as the enemy it destroyed? Commander stood before the conquered assembly for the final time. Behind her, the Prometheus subjects waited in their terrible silence. They had waged war across 1,000 worlds. They had killed billions. They had saved civilizations. And now they had to go back to the ice. The threat is over, reported. Per our agreement, Prometheus units will be returned to Europa for containment. High Arbiter rose. He had aged visibly over the past 7 months. They all had. Commander, he said, we owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. Your soldiers have saved us from extinction. They're not soldiers, said quietly. They never were. Then what are they? It was Unit 7 Cole who answered. He stepped forward and the assembled aliens stepped back. Even now, after everything, they feared him. They would always fear him. We are what humanity creates when survival matters more than conscience, Cole said. His voice was flat, but something in it had changed over the past 7 months. Something almost like awareness. We are the violence your civilizations learned to suppress. The darkness your species evolved past. You became peaceful because you could afford peace. Humans became peaceful because the alternative was extinction. He looked around the assembly hall. These beings, these kind, gentle, civilized beings, had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had never faced true predators. They had never understood what it meant to fight for survival against something that wanted them dead. "You want to know what we are," Cole continued. "We are proof that humanity has not forgotten how to be monsters, that somewhere beneath the peace and the diplomacy and the pretense of civilization, we remember what we truly are." "And what is that?" In asked. "Survivors at any cost." Leaned forward. "Why did you agree to return to containment? You could fight us. You could demand freedom. We could not stop you." Cole was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost human. "Because we understand our purpose now," he said. "Before Europa, we were weapons without a war, violence without direction. We killed because we could, because it was all we knew how to do. 60 years in the darkness gave us time to think, to wonder if we would ever serve a purpose larger than our hunger." He looked at. Something passed between them, understanding perhaps, or something stranger. "You didn't send us because you had to," Cole said to her. "You sent us because you knew we needed to exist for something, to serve something, to be more than the monsters humanity created and locked away." "I sent you because the galaxy was dying," replied. "Yes, and in saving it we found meaning." Cole turned back to the assembly. "We will return to containment. We will sleep beneath the ice and wait in the darkness, because that is our purpose now. We are the monsters humanity keeps in reserve, the violence it cannot permit itself in peacetime, the last resort when all other options have failed." He began walking toward the exit, and the other subjects followed. Their movements were synchronized, but somehow less mechanical than before, less predatory. "You will keep them contained?" asked Forever. Watched her monsters file out of the assembly hall. She had created them. She had feared them. She had unleashed them upon the galaxy, and now she understood them better than she ever had before. "Forever is a long time," she said. "But yes, we'll keep them locked away, waiting for the next time the universe needs something worse than what it's facing." She began walking toward the exit herself. At the doorway she paused. "Humanity spent its whole history terrified of the monsters in the dark," she said. "The things that lurked in shadows, the beasts that hunted in the night. Eventually, we realized the truth." "What truth?" In asked. Turned to face them one last time. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else there too. Pride, maybe, or acceptance. "The monsters in the dark were always us. We were the things that other creatures feared. We were the predators that evolution created to dominate our world. We just forgot for a while, built civilizations, made laws, pretended to be gentle." She nodded toward the departed Prometheus subjects. "They remember what we are. They're the truth we bury so we can pretend to be something else. And when the galaxy needs that truth," she smiled, just barely, "now you know where to find it." The transport lifted off an hour later. 47 stasis pods were loaded into its hold. 47 monsters returned to their frozen sleep. But before the cold took him, Cole opened his eyes one final time. Through the ship's sensors, he looked out at the galaxy, the stars they had saved, the civilizations that would continue, the future they had purchased with violence. He had been created to be a weapon. He had been locked away as a danger. But now he understood. He was not just a weapon. He was a guardian. A terrible, broken guardian that civilizations kept hidden until the unthinkable happened. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between galaxies, something stirred. Something old. Something that had watched the war with great interest. Something that had seen what humanity deployed against the. It was older than the swarm, older than the conquered, older than light itself. It had slept for epochs beyond counting. But now, for the first time in ages past memory, it felt something it had forgotten it could feel. Curiosity. What were these creatures that could create such perfect violence? What were these beings that could birth monsters and then chain them? What would happen if that chain was broken? It wanted to know. The stasis pod sealed, Cole slept, the ship traveled home to Europa. And in the endless dark between stars, something began moving toward Saul. Not quickly, it had no need to hurry. It had waited for billions of years. It could wait a little longer. But it was coming. And when it arrived, it would find out what happened when humanity had no choice but to break the chains completely. Back on Earth, beneath the ice of Europa, 47 monsters dreamed of hunts yet to come. They did not know what approached. They did not care. They only knew that someday they would wake again. And when they did, they would be hungry. The galaxy had learned what humanity was willing to send against its enemies. It had seen the monsters that humans created from their own worst impulses. But it had not seen everything. Somewhere in the black depths of human history there were other projects, other failures, other successes, things even more terrible than Prometheus. Humanity had survived for a reason, not because they were peaceful, not because they were wise, because when the darkness came, they became the darkest thing in it. The universe was vast and full of terrors. Humanity was ready for all of them.